I want to welcome everybody back. I hope you enjoyed this morning's sessions. And, as we talked about, this morning was about appreciating what our Academy does by having an opportunity to hear from several different groups of graduates. Today, here at lunch, we're shifting the focus a little bit. You will once again get a great appreciation for Air Force Academy graduates. But given that where we are here with the 20th anniversary of 9/11, we have a really special treat today. I would encourage you to read the program to understand the bio background of our two guests, Brigadier General Hanna Born, and are they silver or? They're gold. They're still gold. Second Lieutenant Hanna Born. This will be a special presentation about 9/11 and the impact on airmen and families, with the emphasis on family. On 9/11, Hanna Born, Lieutenant Colonel at the time, was a squadron commander at Bowling Air Force Base. And she and Tim dropped their two daughters, Hannah and Heather, at the Pentagon Daycare Center on that fateful day. Let me just hand it over to the general and the lieutenant to tell the story. Thank you, guys.
All right, we can't sit till you sit, sir. You can take the person out of the military, but not the military out of the person, right? Well, with that amazing theatrical introduction, it is a pleasure to be here, and I think I speak on behalf of Second Lieutenant Hanna Born, class of 2020. I couldn't be more proud to have our daughter as part of the Long Blue Line. And she says, "Mom, hold it together." I cry at ribbon cuttings. And we also have another daughter. Our youngest daughter is now second class midshipman, Heather Born, who will be at the dinner tonight. She's in her third year at the Naval Academy. And General Gould mentioned my husband, Tim. We're a mixed marriage because he is a Naval Academy graduate, class of 1975. We met in the Pentagon. And so we are 50-50 for the game tomorrow. I do have a humbling story first to tell because Tim's brother is also a West Point graduate. And so when we were kind of having the Commander-in-Chief's trophy year after year after year, he and his brother would be in the kitchen just having a go at it. And I one time said, "Would you two just be quiet? You're making a big deal out of second place." And unfortunately, we lost the Commander-in-Chief's trophy that year, so I've learned to keep a little bit more humility over hubris. But yes, let's go back to 9/11. What a fateful day, as you put it, sir. And I think we all remember it as if it was a flashbulb, crystal clear memory, no matter where we were. We can remember what we were doing, and we can remember what we were feeling. And on that particular day, I think I can unfold for you first a little of my experience, but I'd really like for you to hear from Hannah, because it's not only what she remembered as a almost three-year-old in the Pentagon daycare with a 4-month-old sister there as well. It's really what it has meant to her since, as she's had to, like many of us, process that and how that has impacted her life and her choice to serve. And I was sitting at Bowling Air Force Base. So the 11th Mission Support Squadron has a mission that's split between the Pentagon and Bowling Air Force Base with contingency missions that are mostly accountability, rescue and recovery, casualty reporting, and accountability of military personnel. And so we were watching that beautiful blue sky, driving in the morning after dropping the kids off. My husband went into Old Town Alexandria in his retirement job, and it was just as he would say, a normal day. And I had a staff meeting at Bowling Air Force Base. We had seen the TV with the first tower hit and thought the same as most everybody. You know, twin engine, somebody had a medical emergency or fell asleep or something happened that's really sad, but not going to change the world kind of, but really sad and terrible. And then when the second tower was hit, there was this doom. I think we all felt that of there's really something not coincidental here, and we ought to be concerned about that, but what is it? Curiosity. And we went into our staff meeting. I had 2 chief master sergeant, first sergeants, my vice, really my whole leadership team. And then a sergeant came running in to the office and said, "Ma'am, the Pentagon's been hit." I turned around and looked in the picture window behind me, and it looked like World War II. A huge plume of smoke, and I just had that gut feel that you had. And the first response I had was first as I guess I needed to send somebody in. And my chief master sergeant said, "Ma'am, relieve me of duty." And he went to the Pentagon, and thank goodness he did. He was our eyes and ears to care for the airmen there. Next, I called my husband, and he answered the phone, I think before it rang. And I said, "The Pentagon's been hit." He said, "Honey, I'm on my way." And I knew that he was going to be doing what he could to rescue the girls, not knowing what he was going to find. And then the third was, okay, mission and people. We got stuff we now have to do. And so I was able to concentrate on that mission. There's more to the story there, but I'm going to hand it to Hanna for a little bit to have her reflect on that day, and then we'll unpack it a little bit. But mostly we'd like to hear some of your questions and reflections, and I think also shape meaning for the lives lost that day and the service going forward and what that means in the long blue line and our example for others. So I'll pass it to, it's hard to say second lieutenant. I have to call her ma'am now because she's active duty. Over to you, honey.
Does this work? Thanks, General. So I was only 3 years old on that day. My memories are a little bit fragmented, where I have bits and pieces of pretty vivid memories, but not necessarily a full chronological order of events that day. I would say probably the common thread, though, for most of my memories is just an overwhelming sense of confusion, where I was really struggling to figure out what was going on or process what was happening. My first memory of that day is being in the daycare center and playing with other kids, where we were in some sort of a dance class and playing with those ribbons that you twirl around. And the next thing I remember was being out in the hallway and just not being able to figure out where we were going, why we were leaving. I thought maybe we were going outside to... I thought maybe we were...
Use this one, it's a little louder.
Okay. Is this better? Okay. Thank you.
We're old.
Apologies. Not at all. So I thought maybe we were going outside to continue the dance class out there. And eventually that confusion as we left the building just turned into an extreme sensory overload. I saw just a groundswell of humanity as everybody tried to evacuate. On top of that, there was just a lot of noise, sounds of fire alarms, sirens from basically every type of emergency vehicle imaginable, and jets and helicopters overhead. And then on top of that, just smell, which was acrid of burning jet fuel and smoke. And so the majority of my memories are about that sensory experience and confusion. And so I think to some extent, my memory has blocked out a lot of what was scary, and most of kind of maybe the mile markers from that day where I have really clear, vivid memories are some of maybe that light at the end of the tunnel. So I remember the confusion. I remember feeling a bit of relief and gratitude for people as they helped us move, for daycare workers as they helped comfort us and make a really scary situation less so. So there were service members who showed up at the daycare center and carried cribs with infants in them for about half a mile to set us up near the Potomac River, about half a mile away from the Pentagon. And they set the cribs up with toddlers in them in a circle, and the older kids like myself, older meaning 3, but older kids like myself were in the middle of the circle, and daycare workers sang to us and let us sit on their laps and basically just did everything to keep us there in that serene center of the circle of cribs rather than looking at the daycare center away from us and the flames. And then my dad eventually picked up my sister and I from that makeshift daycare center and drove us out to a coworker's house where we spent the night. And that's another really vivid memory I have, just because I was so confused. I went down for a nap there, and when my dad woke me up, I thought he was waking me up because it was dinner time and I had slept almost 24 hours through to the next day. And that was, I think, kind of the first immediate sign of regression that my parents saw. And that was something that I think a lot of kids who were in the Pentagon that day experienced, just immediate signs of childhood regression. And they made child psychologists available to us to help us work through that a little bit. But even though most of my memories are around fear, or around confusion rather than fear, it became very evident that fear was a big piece of my experience that day in the years afterwards, when my parents really had to help me work through what I was dealing with. My dad took my sister and I to a hillside where the Air Force Memorial is now, actually 3 days after the attacks on the Pentagon, just to show us where the impact was and try to explain in terms that a 3-year-old could understand exactly what had happened, that a plane had flown into the building and people were trying to do something bad, and then all of the good guys came to help. And that's what we were seeing now with the recovery and rebuilding efforts. And after he explained that to me, in the days following, I would just tirelessly draw and paint images of the attacks, where my parents would see me sitting in the corner in our kitchen just drawing vigorously. And one of those days my dad came over and said, "Hannah, what are you drawing?" And I said, "Well, Daddy, this is the plane and this is the building and these are the flames." And so after that, my dad and mom would sit next to me and just support me as I drew. And they said that as I was drawing those pictures, they could see me become less anxious as I started to process it. But even for years after that, sounds like fire alarms and sirens put me into a state where I was almost inconsolable. At the daycare center, once we moved to Colorado Springs, we had a fire drill one of the first days when I was at the daycare center, and the workers had to call my dad to come in to help console me because I was just so afraid of it. And actually, Donna Head, who was the director at the time, and now the center is named after her, was a big piece in helping me work through those fears and helping me reframe that all of those noises and sounds that I was so afraid of because I was associating them with my experience at the Pentagon that day weren't actually signs of danger, but rather things that were designed to help or indications that help was on the way. And so that was a big part of transforming, for me and for my sister, what we associated to be a traumatic experience to now what inspires us to be part of that help. So even growing up the next years at the academy, just being around cadets and service members and neighbors like the Goulds was incredible for helping my sister and I transition that to seeing people every day commit to something bigger and wanting to be part of that. And I think that's why now I've gone through the academy and commissioned, and my sister's at the academy getting ready to commission in 2 years, and just wanting to serve and hopefully honor not only everyone who passed or sacrificed that day or in the 20 years after, but everyone who continues to serve and who's been a big part of helping us work through it to a place where now we want to use that experience to do something good rather than just being stuck in the trauma there.
Wow, I want to say thank you for sharing your story. And Hannah is sharing her story, and her sister Heather as well. They've been going through this with Fox News and tonight on CNN Live. And there's going to be a CBS Sports coverage at the game. And every time I hear the story, it reminds me of her drawings, actually. Every time she did the drawings, you could see her emerge a little bit stronger. And I think every time we tell our story, we hope it's kind of helping us as a nation and each of us, in resilience, maybe emerge a little bit stronger. And so thank you for that. And I'll go back to 9/11 for me, because so many people say, okay, how is it, when you don't know the status of your kids and you're a mom and a commander at the same time. And one thing that happened when we went into our, immediate practice and procedures of accountability, right? You know where you go when the when something happens, and we had practiced that and practiced that and practiced that, and I was thrilled that the unit responded beautifully. But when we got to our first rally point, one of our key members collapsed, and because her partner was in the Pentagon, which many of them were split between the Pentagon and Bolling Air Force Base, and I had blocked this out as a memory, but I was speaking several years ago at the Department of Agriculture, and a sergeant who was at that rally point remembered it and repeated it to me, and I was like, wow, I did not even remember. And he said, ma'am, you just fell right down to her side and rallied her, and I don't know where you got that. And I said, I don't know. Was it the mom? Was it the commander? I mean, it was instinctual, but I'll tell you, it was also, we needed her. She had some specific skills that were really critical to what we knew we needed to do. And so one of the things that I've learned since, and with colleagues, is that when we have trauma, when we have crisis, our automatic protective, amygdala fires, and it's the fight or flight or freeze, and it's not a great place to stay for very long. And we have to get into, sorry for the speak, but the frontal lobe, where we can actually think and do. And I think role is something that has emerged as when we can think of our role as a parent, our role as a leader, our role as a commander, we're much more likely to be able to be responsive in a good way. And so it was 9 hours before I actually knew that Tim, my husband, and the girls were safe. And that was an eternity. And it was one of the most beautiful moments. It wasn't even from my husband, because we were in a place where communication was not real easy, I'll put it that way. And somehow I got a signal from somebody that my husband worked with who said, you just need to know Tim and the girls are safe. They've evacuated out to, his boss's house, and all is well. And that sense of relief of being able to trust. I trusted that they were fine, and thanks to my husband who was able to go get them. I trusted my first sergeant who, thanks to him, we were able to get pretty quick sense of how the unit was doing and be able to know what was happening in the Pentagon, which we might not have otherwise known. So there's a lot of trust. I want to come back full circle too with the Goulds and this notion of family and how they have, in their natural way, create family. We felt that at the Air Force Academy. We feel that now, and our bigger family with the great blue, the great blue sea of great supporters and Falcons. People ask me, what's it like to be a mom and serve? And I often think about that, because now I have 2 daughters that are made that choice. And I always, it's hard. I don't want to say it's easy, but thank goodness our community serving in uniform understands, and you have a broader family. And so when 9/11 happened, my husband tells the story of people showing up at the Pentagon daycare, knocking on the secure doors, saying, how can we help? And it was these unsung heroes, we don't even know who they are today, who helped take 100 and some kids to this place that looked like, my husband said when he got there, it looked like something out of a Western. The circle of the wagons with 5 infants per ironclad World War II state cribs. And inside, the kids with the providers reading and processing. And he said it was something that was just like serenity inside chaos. And that was people who stepped up, that just did the right thing and knew it wasn't for themselves. It was definitely in service to others. So we have a lot of gratitude. And we also have a lot of respect for the recognition of what 9/11 means for us as a country, in terms of it being unifying, and we need a bit more of that common purpose. It's something that we think about healing together as a nation, and we also think about how we are honoring all those who paid the ultimate price and the 20 years since. So do you want to add to? Yes, thank goodness. I'm going to hand it back to Second Lieutenant Hanna Born.
I just want to add, earlier I talked about my memories from when I was 3, But now being back here stationed in the DC area, I've been at Bowling Air Force Base, and I don't think I really had a full appreciation for what it must have been like for my mom that day until I looked across the river and saw the Pentagon and realized what she must have seen and how she was still able to continue to serve in the capacity that she needed to for everyone else. And I think part of that is also because anytime we ask her about her experience that day, it really is kind of hard to draw out anything of the emotions of what it must have been like to be a mom and know my sister and I were in the Pentagon. And I think part of the reason my sister and I were able to be inspired by service and be inspired by stories from 9/11 the way we were is because when my mom doesn't talk about her own personal story, it really conveys to us that our story is not necessarily unique in any sense. It's a nation story, and just remind us how blessed we are as a family to have all made it out after 9/11 and in the 20 years since. So I think just hearing the way she speaks about it and has for the past 20 years has been a big part of my sister and I being able to recognize how blessed we are and now want to give back and honor and remember families and lives who maybe weren't as fortunate that day. So thank you, Mom.
You all know that if I reached over and kissed her, she'd get a PDA, right? We all know what that is. That's approved. Thank you, sir. The biggest joy, right, of there's a statue that you all know at the Air Force Academy that is my favorite, and the girls know this. Tim knows this because I have many replicas for any birthday or gift they gave me. It's the Eagle and Fledgling statue, and I still to this day, friends and classmates say, "You have always loved that statue. What is it about that statue?" And it's like, I think it's her. It's this visual, like it says, man's flight through life is sustained by the power of his knowledge. Right? We all memorize that, you know it. But it's the visual of this like eagle helping to prepare the fledglings for independent flight. And we don't know what the conditions are they're going to fly in. We don't know what that is going to be like, but it's like that's the mission of the Air Force Academy. We develop leaders of character. We prepare, officers of character, and then we have to let them fly and support them in that journey. And I couldn't be prouder. Oh, I love you too. So I hope we didn't run over too much. We have some time for some questions if you'd like to explore a little bit further. I think one thing I would like to share is that there's a couple of pictures that I know people have picked up on, and I want to describe them to you of the time when my husband took them to see the Pentagon and the burning. And I look at that now, as they're almost 23 and almost 21. And Hannah, in one picture, is trying to console her 4-month-old sister who is just crying. And it's just a natural act that she, as an older sister, wanted to somehow make it all right. And there's another picture, and you have to meet her sister almost immediately reaching back up to grab her lips, kind of to say, thank you, and it's all okay, let's play, kind of thing. And they have been incredible supporters for each other because it's not an easy journey. None of us had an easy time at any of the academies. And so tonight is physics homework, or tomorrow night's physics homework, and she's helping her in some preparation, and Heather is helping Hannah as well in many things as she prepares for her own journey and the Marine Corps Marathon coming up in October. So, questions? Yes, Chris.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, and we want to applaud for you too. Anna, you rock, so we automatically applaud for you. But Anna, you rock as well. So we want to make sure we acknowledge fully that everything you said moved us. I was going to take 2 seconds. I'm going to tell a little narrative. You said, reflect upon what it meant to you, 9/11, just for a second. And so bear with me for a second. So 9/11 happened, I was at Harvard Business School in the restroom, and the guy said to me, a plane hit the towers. And I thought, same thing.
Yep.
There's a little, pebble jumper, says in 172. And then I was standing there ironically in the student union building, basically, and I saw the other one hit, and I was standing next to a Navy SEAL named Bill Berrien, who I had served with ironically 2 years before, a Joint Special Operations Command. I was at JSOC. And Bill and I looked at each other and said, why the beat are we here now? Why are we not down there, downrange? And I'd been head of intel of the 24 Special Tactics Squadron, the J2, J5 intel guy, and he'd been the aide to the general. There was a lot of guilt associated with being, I was in the reserve though, right? A lot of guilt associated with seeing those go down, and I turned on the job with the Counterterrorism Center and CIA to go into corporate and some other things. So here's the arc of it. When everybody around us was sort of losing, a lot of tears, a lot of people upset trying to figure out what's going on, the role kicks in. So I went to my buddy, a guy named Matt Turner, MIT graduate, ROTC guy, been a friend of mine since Intel School. We went home, we put on our uniforms, he was still in the reserve, and we came back to campus. And another friend was a priest. Tom Duell ended up being the head of student life at Notre Dame later on. So we walked around the Harvard Business School campus. It's like a joke, a priest, 2 airports all
What's the punchline?
They just calmed everybody down and said institutions are still here.
Yeah.
God's still God. The military's still here. And we're going to be okay. And I remember people running to me and saying, Chris, and just like hugging me, right? And just people that probably never thought twice about the military, but they needed us. They needed our work. They needed you to be the commander. And so that was the other part. So the last thing I'm going to mention, I almost got called up then. I'm getting called up 2 years later. I landed September 11, 2003 in a blacked out C-130, civilian clothes as a human guy with a bunch of Rangers, and went down range and served. After I did my tour of duty, which I'm proud of done, and would tell you about it, but I'd have to kill you, all this human secrets.
Right.
I came home, I gave my mom my Bronze Star that I earned, and she took it and set it next to my dad's Bronze Star that he had earned in Vietnam. And she wrote his name, and he's awesome 2 years ago, wrote his name, and it has, he was alive at the time, and has also, she wrote in like 1970. Because my mom was 8 months pregnant with me when my dad volunteered to go down range as an officer in Vietnam. And she put mine next to that one. And there's a circle of service there that goes beyond race, color, sexual orientation. It's all about this great country we live in. And so thank you for listening to your story, and thank you for indulging with mine. I don't tell the story much because you just don't do those things, but I just, I'm allowed now, I had to say it. But thank you for letting me say it.
No, thank you, Chris. And I don't know if all of you appreciate, as a Harvard Business School graduate and now on our Harvard University Board of Overseers, which is a highly selective position, we're going to be benefiting from your wisdom and leadership at the Harvard University. So thank you. It's a small world because I used to get his business cards coming through the Harvard campus all the time. So it's like I knew Chris had been here because he usually just, I missed you, where are you? You're not present for duty and those kinds of things. So yeah, congratulations for you. My role that I have right now at the Kennedy School is still developing public servant leaders. So it's sort of like just what do I do with my hair and what do I wear? But it's the same, kind of mission for preparing people at different levels. But I found that a lot of people are struggling right now, particularly veterans, and that's who I work mostly with what's happening in Afghanistan. And they're kind of like, what was it all for? How do we tell our story? What does it mean? How are people going to think about us and what we've done? And we've really leaned into that to say, let's put on some panels, let's get some crosstalk and dialogue. People need to recognize that there's more mission ahead, and we have to role model for people how to think professionally through what can be sort of confusing right now for a lot of people. So thank you for bringing that up. Other questions or comments or stories?
Hanna, we knew your journey through high school and your desire to attend the academy, but what went through your mind? You had lots of options. You could have gone to school. You could have made a mistake like Heather and gone to class. But what went into your mind after having had this experience and growing up in the Born family when you chose yourself?
I think part of it started, or my parents, when I asked them this, say they kind of saw the shift immediately, where my third birthday was about 2 weeks after the attacks on 9/11, and they had been planning a Dora-themed birthday party. And I asked last minute if they could change it to American flag themed. And it was not necessarily because of the flag physically as a symbol, but because driving around in the weeks following 9/11, I saw the flag everywhere. Every house was flying one. Every yard had them in it, or cars had them flying off the back. And it was kind of a symbol of community and people coming together to support one another through healing. And then moving out to the Air Force Academy in 2002, I think I felt that sense of community again on base, and being around service members and cadets every day. Being at the elementary school on base during the efforts in Iraq and Afghanistan, a lot of my classmates had parents or family members, siblings, whoever, deployed, and we had an American flag wall where any student who had a loved one deployed would have a picture of them and that loved one on the wall, where teachers and other students just knew, hey, this person might need a little bit of extra support right now. And I think just growing up on base, seeing that sense of community and the way that people supported one another was really kind of what solidified to me that this is something I wanted to do. And then moving away from the academy after my freshman year of high school to Boston and living in a civilian community kind of made me rethink that a little bit, because then I saw people serving in a different capacity, whether it be nurses, doctors, just in their local communities. And I had to think about, where is it that I feel like I can make a difference? And ultimately, I think it was because of a lot of the mentors and role models that I had on the Air Force Academy, cadets, neighbors like the Goulds, that my sister and I both felt like the military was where we could best contribute to those purposes. And yes, I made the right decision to go to the Air Force Academy. Heather got a little lost in the last step, but I think all of that really is ultimately what made me decide to go to the Air Force Academy and Heather to the Naval Academy.
And I still remember, because she did get, she went to all of the summer camps and tried them in the summer seminars, and, had a realistic preview, but it always came back to Air Force. And eventually, when she got her appointment, she came running down the stairs at like 5 in the morning. And of course, Tim and I, both military officers, we were up, and she said, I got my appointment. Should I say yes?
Tell you the rest of the story. I was super excited to tell them I got my appointment, and one of her insiders from the academy had already told her.
How did you find that out? Dad's been talking. But it's, our thought was, give it some time, make sure, you still, want to wait and hear from some of the other academies. But eventually she said, I always wanted to go there, and I would like to accept the appointment, and we were thrilled for her. And not only that, but several of her, we just saw a picture of her and 2 of her other friends who grew up at the Air Force Academy, also classmates, graduated, and the picture is them on the beach in California. And I looked at it, and they've been like since 3, 4, 5 years old growing up together across the academy. One is doing his PhD right now at RAND Corporation in Santa Monica. One is doing her master's degree at the University of Arizona, and Hannah's working on her master's degree at Georgetown. And I looked at that picture and I just said, wow, the Air Force Academy did well, and they're doing well, and our Air Force is going to be stronger because of it. That was a great question, sir. See what else we can draw out. Fred?
Hanna Born, maybe for Hannah, but probably for you and maybe Tim. The stories that went around, no better place to ask this than you right now, about Marines doing the circle of wagons in the baby cribs area. Maybe you can validate for me how family this is. They're good Marines, they're good people. You said there were people knocking on the door to help the nursery, people in and out, probably not of a particular service or anything, but they're all heroes. They're just as, you've mentioned how much heroes they are, how much family we are, regardless, even though your sister's in that other school right now. Good luck to her. And not so much good luck to the team tomorrow. You're going to kick their ass. but were there more Marines than others at that circle of wagons, or more civilians?
You wanna answer
We
that?
don't- and not to bother you with any trivial questions.
So I think the reason that it circulated as Marines was because my dad actually had a lot of questions about how the daycare workers could have managed to get so many kids so far away, because most of them were maybe elderly or not in the best of health, where they could have moved that many by themselves. And the story was that the first person who knocked on the door and said, "How can we help?" was a Marine. So she saw the Marine uniform first, and there was probably soldiers, sailors, and airmen behind him. But that was initially the thought of Marines. And I actually connected with somebody, an airman who was part of that recovery effort about a year ago. He emailed me and said he saw the story, and he was one of the people who helped evacuate us. And he wasn't looking for any sort of recognition, but just, I always wondered what happened to those kids. And so as he told the story, they had been at the Pentagon Officers Athletic Club right before everything happened. And that wasn't too far from the daycare center. So they immediately had the awareness to come and think to help evacuate us kids out of the daycare center. And it probably didn't hurt that maybe some of the fittest people from the athletic club were the ones carrying cribs. So.
And my husband's story actually it went viral. He was asked to speak at the Northern Command on the commemoration of 9/11 in 2005, and then I think in 2006 as well, and then posted his comments, and it got picked up and shaped in many different ways, as it does on social media. And so there's been quite a bit of interest since then. And he is a Marine, and so he did have that proud, like, you know, the Marines got there first, and we have had a little bit of marital strife over this story. I'm glad to hear the airman story come in there now. Yeah.
I think your story is incredible, honestly, and not just 9/11, but your role as a leader. I think America right now is craving authentic, selfless leadership. As a nation, I think we're craving in the military. Have you ever thought about writing a book about your experiences? You know, when I look at you as a military officer and now in the civilian sector, I think it's an incredible story. Who wouldn't want to buy a book that's got a Born to Lead, right?
Yeah, people have said in the Jason Bourne series, I said, ours is B-O-R-N. I have not. I mean, we have a joke because I actually went out to, we have a condo in Keystone, and when Hanna was going through basic training and then soon a fourth classman, I decided to go out to our condo and spend a month because I was going to write a book. And Hanna keeps asking me, Mom, whatever happened to that book you were going to write? It didn't get written, but thank you for that. I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly that we need more stories of selflessness, and I love the concept and definition of a leader of character. It just resonates with me of what we need in this common cause, common purpose, and it's how we define a leader of character now. It's our individual journey that we're on to be better and to grow. It's about developing others, and how do we best do that? We were just talking about that. And then getting the work done, getting it accomplished together. And there's a lot of wisdom in that framework that we grew up with and that we are all about. And we need to be purveyors of hope and trust.
And kind of going along your question with the idea of telling a story in a book, we just read one for an event on Wednesday that was The Only Plane in the Sky, and it's an oral history of a lot of stories on 9/11. I think there's close to 500 in the book, and I think the themes that you're interested in kind of show through in that book, maybe even more so, because it's not one person who's maybe expected to be a leader as an officer in the Air Force, but it's stories of 500 people who stepped up that day in ways that they probably didn't think they ever would have needed to when they woke up that morning, and just everyday individuals finding a leadership role and how they managed the attacks and their responses to it that morning. So I think a lot of those themes that maybe would have been in a book that my mom wrote also shone through in the way they captured those stories.
The book's by Garrett Graff, and it came out 2019, and we had the opportunity to have a conversation with him with a group called With Honor, which is a nonprofit that is bipartisan, helping veterans get elected to Congress, and David Gergen is our trustee, and it's trying to put principles above politics. Right.
Any more questions at all?
Thank you for who you are, why you are, and what you do.